Hello, everyone. I welcome you to another podcast series. In this episode, I would like to share with you story of David. This particular story will help you or perhaps may even resonate with some of you with a similar experience. And towards the end of it, you would learn how grief coaching helped this person find a way out of his issues. David was one of those high performer in an organization where he worked for close to around 7 years. He had a good track record of his performance, was hardworking, sincere, and committed to the firm, unlike others who may have had jumped roles and jobs for a higher compensation or a higher level role. But David was a bit different. He believed in commitment, loyalty, and giving his 200% to wherever assignment he would take up within the organization. With such good qualities, David did made a very good progress at the organization, but he was taken aback when in the 7th year of his tenure with the firm, he was called in by his senior manager and was told that his appraisal results were not as the others expected them to be. In fact, his performance had dipped to an extent where he was put on an improvement program, which was for a tenure of 4 weeks, and he had to demonstrate an improvement in his performance by following certain criterias to be rehired in the firm. Otherwise, he had a very high risk of being fired from his role. After the meeting, it devastated David to a very large extent. Not because he was on any kind of a program with a fancy name, but as a human being, his connection with the firm ran deep. He was emotionally attached to the processes, to the organization, wherein he has given his blood and sweat and has built it up right from the scratch. But with changing times, or maybe a slip in his own personal development, he was now on a verge of an improvement program because his performance was not at par. Cases like David also throws light on how organizations fail to really hone and skill of our employees who we may expect them to perform at their peak in their first or 2 years with the organization, but later on no other development is given to them in terms of honing their skills or getting them up ready for the next roles. This eventually lead to cases very similar to like David, where they may start to take a dip in their productivity and having no view of what are their blind spots, their weaknesses. They may continue to perform in a similar pattern, thinking this is how one needs to work to really succeed. So it was not just merely a failure of David as a performer or an employee in an organization, but altogether a failure of the system and the people around him. However, at the receiving end, it was just David. Having learned that he was on an improvement program, David felt very humiliated with this newfound title and immediately start to look for jobs outside. The loyalty, commitment, hard work, everything came to an abrupt end. What he was trying to escape was not a title, but it was more of something that he personally felt a connect with the organization. He was so afraid and ashamed that he was even reluctant to share the news with his own family members, regardless that they had no real connect with the organization and it in no way would affect them. He frantically looked for a job, found one, and within a week's time, quit the firm. The whole thing, even it took less than 7 days, but a lot of trauma was left inside David's mind. Good and bad memories both, but the bad memories now were dominating most of his thought and approach. Even as he tried to settle in his new role, he no longer planned to stay committed to any organization or to any role or supervisor, regardless of who they are and how well they treat him. Time went by, but he was not really as productive or as committed as he was supposed to be. He knew he was just working at an average level, even though he could have given more. But what he didn't knew was that he was carrying a heavy baggage from his previous organization, and he had still not figured out what really went wrong there, what could have been improved, and how and to what extent was he responsible for it. David case came to me as a reference from one of my colleague, and it was one of the most interesting case that I've ever handled in my coaching experience. This also resonated a lot deeper with me because I have also been at David's place at some point in time in my life. So when we both spoke, and while he narrated his story to me at certain points it was a deja vu experience, as if he was just sharing my story to me. We had 3 sessions, out of which one was a deep dive, in which we both learned together. Specifically, one part which was all about understanding our own blind spots, how a well productive, effective, efficient performer can suddenly slip and become a case of improvement program. As I mentioned earlier, it was not just David who failed. It was a collective entire system of the appraisal of the supervisor, including the organization as whole. So when we did the deep dive session, both of us not just learned the blind spots, but also learned a key thing here. There are many a times when we have crises that strike us. One fine day, somebody telling us that you're no longer a top performer, or you now have a tag of a employee who needs to undergo an improvement plan. This is not something that's built in just one day. There could be multiple instances which actually led to this. And like how a tall building that could crumble, it needs to be addressed at the root to understand what really made those foundations so weak, what exactly went wrong, and what could be improved. So when we both sat together, we had number of conversations, but the deep dive session was the game changer. Besides the blind spots, there were many other factors very common which helped us understand what was within our control, what was beyond, and what could have been done better. After that, we came across for another session. Now, this one was, since now we know the root cause, it was time to sit with it, regardless of how uncomfortable or bitter the realities were, and think of a plan ahead which includes a lot of lessons that were learned and a lot that could have been done in a better way. We did 3 such sessions, where there was a lot of adjustments, changes, modifications about what was within control and what was beyond. It was very difficult to really sit in with certain newfound realities because it takes really a time to let the reality sink in. As human beings, it might be very easier to say, but it's very difficult to really experience it firsthand and then move ahead with it. There were difficult moments, and there was one funny moment in which David did not turn up for the next three coaching sessions, not because he was afraid, but he felt too awkward to share further or talk on it. As a coach, my role here was to give him and ensure that he was all safe to confide, confess, share, and he will not be judged for it. I hope I did that job well because he did turn up for the next many other sessions later, and we did had a very fruitful coaching session close to around for 6 months. It was an interesting journey where I along with my client learned a lot. And while we created a roadmap for the future, it involved a lot of lessons that were learned from the past. Now, a more key question that remained was how this change is to be monitored. Because there are certain things which we need to do on a repeated basis till they become a part of us or a part of a habit. And therefore, the goals were set on not just where we monitor progress, but it's more about bringing that and making it as part of life. This involves honing skills. In one of the learning roadmaps of David, which really lacked very badly, was as he was moving up the ladder, besides the technical skills training that he attended very diligently, there's a soft skills part of being assertive, of holding on, improving on communication, especially not to speak our mind all the time, anger management issues, interpersonal skills. These things which may together constitute as a leadership skills, however, at an individual level play a crucial role in how successful one is both in personal and professional life. So one of our goals in the learning roadmap for David was to hone few of the very key skills that he was really lacking behind, and perhaps were the precise reason why after a 5 year success career progress, all of a sudden the sixth and the seventh year turned out to be a disaster for him. Finally, we agreed on two methods that would help both me and David understand how far this change has been implemented in his life. We agreed to other learning roadmaps as well with some key criterias. I would not go into it into detail in here because that's quite lengthy. As a result, even today, even though we do not no longer hold coaching sessions, but I have an agreement with him for a touch up meeting every month where we do discuss no longer the progress, but those few key areas which he lacked really badly. How good is he doing in those? In a way, holding him accountable and also helping him understand that as human beings, there would be time where we may not be as successful as we might think, and there were times where we may blame the whole world except our own selves. These monthly meets, it's like a peeping inward to understand how well the personal growth plan is moving, and if there is a change required, what needs to be changed. This way, we did this entire setup for 2 years, and now he's leading into one of the top Fortune 500 firms at a very senior level. We do connect often, and this one particular case gave us a lot. Maybe it was his those 2 devastating years which today are actually the reason for his success. So friends, job loss grief may not necessarily be always that would bring in negative consequence or keep you stuck forever. There is always a way out. There's always options, alternatives, and solutions available. The only thing you need to do is to reach out, seek help, and get coached. That's it for today. Thank you so much for being a listener, and I'll talk to you soon in our next video or audio podcast session. Thank you.